So, welcome back to This Week in Golf on Sauga 960. My next guest is the author of the book Tiger and Phil, Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry. He's currently a golf writer for Sports Illustrated, previously covered golf for ESPN and the Tampa Bay Times. Bob Harig, welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you having me.
So, Tiger and Phil, it's been one of sports' best rivalries for 2 decades. Why now is the right time to write this book?
Well, you can make an argument that it's still going, that maybe I should have waited. I mean, given everything that's happened here in the last few months, I certainly need to be able to write an addendum or another chapter or two if there's a paperback version, because in 2022, there's been a lot going on with these two guys. I mean, when I concluded the book, I did not know if Tiger was going to be able to play this year. It didn't look good, frankly. And Phil's issues outside of the PGA Tour and with rival golf leagues, I don't think anybody could have seen that coming to this point. But the reason that I decided to do it then was I felt like we were coming to the close of their careers in terms of major glory. Phil did win a major last year at age 50 to become the oldest major champion, which only enhanced the idea in my mind. I was in the throes of writing the book at that point. And, so he kind of one-upped Tiger with a great last, we think, major victory. I mean, I wouldn't put it past either one of them to win again. But I mean, as the point we are in their careers, it didn't seem like that was going to happen. And so it seemed like a good time to dive into the fact that, nobody had really captured their interactions. The fact that while there was a lot of great players in their time, those were the two that stood above. I mean, Phil had like 270 weeks where he was ranked number 2 in the world. He never got to number 1. I mean, that's an amazing accomplishment in itself to be number 2 that long. And every one of them, or almost every one of them, was with Tiger as number 1. So Phil was, the very, very strong number 2 to an incredible number 1.
Yeah, that blew my mind when I read the book. I was like, Phil's never been number 1. I've been covering golf for a few years, and I just somehow that fact never came across my table. So I was kind of a little surprised by that. But
Phil's not only has he never been number 1, he never led the money list. He never won the FedEx Cup outright. He never was the player of the year as voted by the players. And I don't think he ever had the lowest scoring average for any one year. And yet look at his record. I mean, it does go to show that, sometimes circumstances. In 1996, Phil won 4 times. He won the World Series of Golf, which was sort of the forerunner to a World Golf Championship event. Tom Lehman won twice, but he won the Open, and so he was Player of the Year. Phil easily could have been Player of the Year that year. There were other times where he had great years and somebody just outdid him. But yet, obviously, you add it all up, and it's an amazing career.
So Phil is 5 years older than Tiger. So Tiger, not necessarily on Phil's mind at a young age, but Tiger always had Phil on his mind chasing him. So can you lay out some of the success they both had as amateurs? I know they both won several U.S. amateurs, and why kind of Phil was the target on Tiger's dartboard more so.
Yeah, you're right. It's because of the age. I mean, Phil wouldn't have necessarily known much about Tiger when Phil was certainly in high school, even in college. Tiger had yet to do anything on a national stage at that point. Phil, won the U.S. Amateur in 1990. He won a NCAA title in 89, 90, and 92. He won he won a tour event, the Tucson Open, in 1991 when he was a junior in college. I mean, those are amazing amateur results. To win NCAA titles, you're beating your peers at the highest level. To win a US Am, obviously very prestigious, but to win a tour event, to actually contend in a tour event, Tiger never did that. Tiger's best finish in a tour event was a tie for 22nd at the British Open in 1996. It was his last pro event as an amateur, and he really didn't have a lot of success in them. So if you were to put their amateur careers next to each other and didn't know the player, you'd say, wow, both of these are really impressive. Obviously, Tiger won 3 straight U.S. juniors, 3 straight U.S. amateurs. Bobby Jones didn't win 3 straight U.S. amateurs, and he was a career amateur. He played until he was 28 years old. Tiger turned pro when he was 20. So to be able to do that was incredible. You know, Jack Nicklaus didn't do it. But that pro victory that Mickelson had, and the fact that he had great success in college, Tiger did too. Tiger also won an NCAA title, but he only stayed for 2 years. You know, I thought like, wow, that put them on equal footing. And U.S. amateur success does not portend pro success. You know, the guy that the first two players that Tiger beat in the U.S. Am, one of them was Hank Haney's brother, Trip Haney. Trip Caney. He never turned pro. The next one was Buddy Marucci, who was 43 years old at the time. He was a car salesman. I mean, Tiger beating him did not suggest that he was going to beat pros. You know, it was a great accomplishment, winning all those amateur matches. And even his last one against Steve Scott. Steve Scott did turn pro, but didn't have a great pro career. So winning the amateur was an incredible achievement, but there's been plenty of U.S. amateur winners who never did anything as pros. But winning a pro event as an amateur, pretty impressive. So you could lay them together and think, well, Phil would have had the better pro career. Obviously, it didn't work out that way, and it didn't take long really for Tiger to come out and you know, kind of set down the flag and actually move on from Phil.
I love that name, Trip Haney. I think if they did a Happy Gilmore 2, he would be like the antagonist in it, Trip Haney. I think. So we talk in the book, you talk about the 97 Masters. And to me, it looks like that's the separation point when Tiger's stardom and fame starts to separate from Phil. Can you kind of lay out, you know, what was happening around the 97 Masters that kind of help, you know, push
Sure.
that ahead?
Well, if you go back to that time, obviously there was a lot of hype with Tiger. You know, he turned pro after winning that third straight US Am in '96. He won 2 of his first 7 starts. I mean, he was like the PGA Tour Rookie of the Year, barely playing. You know, but going into the '97 season, you know, Phil was in the top 10 in the world. He had just come off a 4-victory season. He had 9 wins himself. There was no reason to think that Phil wouldn't win the Masters that year. I mean, going into the Masters, Tiger had 3 PGA Tour wins, obviously in a short time. Phil had 9. Phil was ranked ahead of him, you know, and so, but the way Tiger won, obviously he came in with incredible hype. He was listed among the favorites, which is amazing. It was only his 3rd Masters. It was his first major championship as a pro. Obviously shoots 40 for the front 9. And then you know, went on a tear to win by 12. There was so much about that win, the victory margin, all the records he set, becoming the first man of color to win, you know, the Masters. You know, it had record TV ratings despite the fact he had a 9-shot lead going into the final round. I mean, people were mesmerized by him. Meanwhile, Phil missed the cut. First time he missed the cut at the Masters, and he didn't miss the cut at the Masters again for like another 14 or 15 years. So it was just kind of weird juxtaposition there that Phil, who many would have thought, you know, Phil finished 3rd at the Masters in '96 that Faldo won and Norman lost. You know, so why wouldn't Phil have a chance to win in '97? You know, I mean, obviously everybody thought he was trending towards winning a major, and it took a lot longer.
So one of my favorite stories in the book, speaking of the 97 Masters, and you mentioned Tiger, you know, the first black man to win the Masters. Well, Lee Elder, the first black man to participate in the Masters. And you have this great story in the book. It literally made me chuckle aloud. I was just hoping you could kind of retell that story for the audience.
That's right. I mean, Lee Elder, who passed away not that long ago, first black golfer to play in the Masters in 1975, and obviously he took a great interest in Tiger. You know, Tiger spoke about Lee Elder and like Charlie Sifford as you know, minority golfers who helped pave the way for him. And Elder lived in Florida at the time, and Tiger obviously has this 9-shot lead, and everybody's fairly certain he's going to close that out. So Elder flew up to Atlanta from Florida on early that Sunday morning, and he rented a car. It's a 2.5-hour drive to Augusta. And he was anxious, and on the way there on I-20, he got pulled over. He was speeding, and he tried to talk his way out of the ticket. He tried to explain to the patrolman, you know, Lee Elder, you know, I'm going to watch Tiger Woods today. He's going to make history at the Masters, and basically the answer he got was, you know, I don't know who Tiger Woods is, and I don't like golf. and and so he did not get out of that ticket, and basically, was sort of admonished. It's like you better take care of this, or it's going to be worse. So Elder told that story with a good bit of relish.
That's awesome. I love that. So Chris McKee, joined by Bob Harig, the author of Tiger and Phil, Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry, available on Amazon and most major bookstores all across North America. So we talked about the 97 Masters. In 98, Phil and Tiger played a practice round and then didn't play another practice round until 2018. So can you lay out why? I got a good chuckle at your story about that 1998 practice round. Can you explain kind of what went on and then what led to them not playing another practice round for 20 years?
Yeah, that was at the LA Open, which was that year for 1 year played at Valencia Country Club, and somehow they ended up playing a Tuesday practice round together. Phil's known for wanting to have action in those practice rounds. He's always felt it prepared him for the tournament. And I write a lot more about that in the book too. Some of his legendary gambling exploits in Tuesday practice rounds and pigeons that he set up and things like that. But that time he played with Tiger, and I don't know the circumstances of how it came to this, but Phil won $500. Tiger had to pay him. He paid him in $100 bills, and not being content with the bragging rights or the money, Phil took a photo of those 5 $100 bills, and then wrote a note on it. Dear Tiger, these Benjis are very happy in their new home. Thanks, Phil. Put it in his locker. Well, I don't know that Tiger appreciated that too much, because they did not play another practice round together for 20 years. Now, I don't know if it stemmed all from that, but clearly it meant they probably weren't going to be playing one in the near future. And if you think about the time frame, the following year, things started to ratchet up. Phil and Tiger were paired in the third round of the US Open at Pinehurst, the one that Payne Stewart won. Everybody remembers how, Phil lost by 1, but that was one that Tiger was very much in as well, going to the last few holes and going to the 17th hole, he still could have won, and he let it get away from him. Obviously 2000, Tiger wins 3 straight majors. Phil played with Tiger in the 4th round of the Masters in 01, which was the completion of the Tiger Slam. Imagine if Phil pulls that off and wins his first major there to deny Tiger. So it was starting to become a little bit more tense between them. And so the idea of them playing practice rounds probably wasn't that feasible anyway, no matter what happened in 98. Tiger was more of a loner. Phil liked those money games. Tiger didn't want to be playing with a lot of people watching. He wanted to get out early and get it done. So that probably had something to do with it as well. But still, it did sort of set the stage, and it kind of, showed Phil's playful side and how there was, just a little bit of I've tried to say this all the time. There wasn't, wouldn't say it's animosity between them, but there was tension, friction. They just had their moments.
What do you think the lowest point of their relationship was over the past 2 decades? Can you pinpoint any particular era?
Yeah, I'm the most recent times I'm wondering about a little bit, because even though they softened there around the 2015-16 timeframe, I wonder if it's gone a little bit the other way now with recent events. And I can't tell you for sure, but I don't know where their relationship stands right now. I don't think it's as good as it was a few years ago. I don't think it's as bad as it was 20 years ago. But, I try to use the Ryder Cup of 04 as a telling point in time. That is where the tension was really at its height. I think it suggested, some acrimony. In 04, I think people who follow golf closely know that that's the only time Tiger and Phil were ever paired as partners in a Ryder Cup, and it didn't go very well. They lost both matches. The U.S. got crushed. It didn't help that the 2 best players on the U.S. team were put out there and they didn't win. But I think you have to look a little bit deeper into that year to understand why maybe it wasn't a good idea. I think at the time people were excited about it. Like, I try to defend Hal Sutton, the captain, on this. He caught a lot of grief unnecessarily. The bottom line is, no matter whether you get along or not, if you just go out and play, you can win. They didn't win. And so Sutton took the grief. But if you look at that year, Phil finally breaks through and wins a major at the Masters. Tiger was not in contention. That year, Tiger was actually going through a swing change, and he had one of his worst years. Did not contend in any of the four majors, won just one time on the PGA Tour. Meanwhile, Phil wins the Masters, finishes second at the US Open, misses a playoff by a shot at the British Open, and is right there again at the PGA. He was top 6 in all four majors that year. He could have easily won 2 or 3 of them. Tiger's not a factor. So now, a month, 6 weeks after the last major, here they are at the Ryder Cup. Tiger's probably frustrated at not a great year, working things out still in his game, trying to get ready for the next year. And he's going to help Phil, who's just, created a tiny little dent in the armor. He's finally won his first major. He's had success. He's gained confidence. And it just didn't seem like, when you look at it from afar, like they were going to be collaborative. And all their body language suggested such. The quotes I have from people who witnessed it, saw them, their competitors saw it as a great opportunity. They used it as fuel to beat them. There was probably nothing for them to lose. If they lose, they're supposed to. If they win, it's a great, get, and it's something to fire everybody else up. And that's exactly how it played out.
So you talk about Ryder Cup. So the 2016 Ryder Cup in your book is when you say they began to mend their relationship. Can you talk about maybe some of the conversations the two of them had around that time that led to them beginning to mend their relationship?
Well, in 2014, Phil put himself out there at the Ryder Cup in Scotland when he called out Tom Watson. And while he later apologized for the way that went down, his actions led to a lot of change. And Tiger deep down wanted to see that change. He was probably right there with Phil saying, yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. These guys had no success or very little success in the Ryder Cup. They were frustrated that they had no say in it. They were frustrated that there wasn't a better plan in place. And the fallout from that was a better plan. They had this Ryder Cup committee. Phil and Tiger became very big roles in that. They used them as the older guys, as the veteran guys. They started to talk more. And then also Tiger acknowledged that in 2015, when he was going through some of his back woes and his chipping woes, Phil actually reached out to him to offer help. That would have never happened 5 years before. Tiger would have never asked Phil for chipping help. Phil would have never asked Tiger, hey, how do you hit these long irons so solid? Even though they might have wanted to, their pride wouldn't allow it. But at that time, he did. And Tiger was actually touched by that. And, they collaborated. Phil was playing on the Ryder Cup team. Tiger was an assistant for Davis Love. They texted a lot. They talked strategy. They talked captain's picks. They did that in 16. Actually, Tiger did a little bit in 15 with the President's Cup. He didn't go to it in Korea, but he was doing that from afar. Was heavily involved in 16 and 17. He was an assistant to Steve Stricker for the international captain, the international President's Cup team. So Tiger's involved again. He's there on site. Phil's playing. So during that period, there was sort of a truce, and they'd gotten older, more perspective. Tiger had a lot more perspective after the back problems, and then, in 18 was the first time they played a practice round together in those 20 years. That was at the Masters. And I think what we've come to learn is some of that was born out of commercial interests. They saw an opportunity to set up those matches. They had the one in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And I think their original plan was to do more of those with both of them involved. And, COVID got in the way. They did one for charity. Then Tiger's own, issues got in the way with having some more back problems in 2020. So he wasn't part of any that year, later in the year. And then, of course, this horrific car crash in 2021. It kind of, that stuff it sort of subsided for Tiger, and Phil still was involved. Now Phil's not involved in the latest one, which is going to be just NFL players. So, but I think part of their getting along had to do with commercial interests too. So you don't know how much of it was real and how much of it was, hey, we can benefit each other. But by and large, still, it was better than it used to be, a lot better.
So, you mentioned 2018, then we get to 2019, Tiger winning the Masters. And then last year off the top, you mentioned it, Phil being the oldest major winner winning the 2021 PGA Championships. I mean, the parallel of these two guys still going at that age is unbelievable. Just talking about maybe, quickly, we're running late for time here, but what each of those victories, the 2019 Masters meant, and then Phil getting the 2021 PGA meant for their rivalry, because it's sort of continued it in a way.
It did. I mean, that was a great in 2019. Phil was sort of waning. He had won that year. He actually won at Pebble Beach. He won in 2018 in Mexico, but those were his only victories in like 4 years. And Tiger comes back with all this fanfare in 2018 after the back surgery. He wins the Masters in 19, and that was a different win for Tiger. He wasn't the top dog like he had been for so long. He was in the mix with all these other top dogs. Molinari, who he played with, had beat him the year before at Carnoustie to win the Open. I mean, Brooks Koepka was in the mix. Dustin Johnson was in the mix. Webb Simpson was there. Xander Schauffele. These were the guys now. Bubba Watson even had a chance. These were the guys who were the emerging players, the top players. And here's this, 43-year-old guy who manages to figure out a way to beat them. It was such a historic win the way it came off. It was 14 years after his last Masters win, 11 years after his previous last major. And Phil was very, very complimentary of that win. He left him a note in his locker, a different kind of note this time. He left him a congratulatory note in the champions locker room that day. And then, Phil, as I said, I think he one-upped him. I mean, to win the PGA last year at age 50, that was the oldest major champion had been Julius Boros. He set that record in 1968. So that record held for 53 years. As great as there's been gains in players getting more fit and playing longer into their careers, we just didn't, we don't see players that age win majors. And the fact that Phil was able to do that, I kind of put it out there, hey, look, that's something now Tiger's going to want to try to do. So, that's where the rivalry might continue. I noted that it could continue as, they should each be Ryder Cup captains. We don't know what the status is, though, with Phil, with all that's gone on, and if he's damaged all that.
Yeah, both those wins really inspiring for me. So I'm team lefty, so always felt a connection to Phil. And then Tiger and I are the exact same age. So growing up, it was always kind of like everything he did, he's doing this at 21 while I'm 21. And so he's winning Masters at, a late age. It gave me kind of hope in that. So Bob, we're getting pressed for time here up against it. So I want to bring us up to the current point in time. Both Tiger and Phil scheduled to play a couple majors this summer. Mm-hmm. What are the likelihood we see both of them in the PGA and US Open upcoming in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think Tiger is more certain than Phil. Tiger is due to his leg. The fact that he played the Masters was a huge surprise. Now the PGA wouldn't be as much of a surprise. He went and played at Southern Hills on his way to a charity event that had a lot of fanfare. He played the whole round. The person who caddied for him, the director of golf at the club there at Southern Hills, said he looked great. So unless there's some kind of a setback, you figure he's gearing up for that. And then there'll be another month before the US Open. So could he then play there? Does he play somewhere else? He's already announced he's going to play at St. Andrews. So these are all great signs for Tiger going forward. Phil is much more murky. We just don't know. He has not played a competitive round of golf since February 6th. That was the last time he's played anywhere. It was at the Saudi event. And there was a big fallout a couple of weeks later, when he was quoted about talking about the tour's obnoxious greed. It was learned that he was heavily involved in the Live Golf Investments League that Greg Norman is backing. Obviously, forget the Saudi part of that. That obviously is controversial. We understand why. But even if the money was coming from Mark Cuban or Bill Gates, it would be controversial because it's a rival. It can damage the PGA Tour, and the PGA Tour is where Phil's made his living. It's where he's made his legacy. So people have a problem with that, and I understand that. So I say that, and I'm surprised the fallout has been this strong against Phil, knowing what we know now. He said some things that were harsh. Maybe he shouldn't have said some of them. But other than that, nothing other than his words. Yes, some actions too. he was possibly helping them start their league. I can see where that would be taken wrong. But other than that, we allow people to come back typically. We allow people another chance. He's had a 30-year track record of pretty good, really good. So it's a little surprising to me it's gotten to this point, but we really just don't know if he's going to play or not, because even though he's entered, he had to. There was a deadline. There's just been so much fallout that you just wonder where he is at this point.
Well, I did a local radio show. Someone asked me about, my predictions for Tiger and Phil this summer, and I just said huge TV ratings. That was it. That's my prediction right there.
Yep.
So Chris McKee, joined by Bob Harig, the author of Tiger and Phil, Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry. Bob, can't thank you enough for joining us here on Sauga 960.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate you having me.